Hello and welcome to the Cacawphony. I'm Ted, and today we've got with me... Introduce yourselves, please.
I'm Glucose. Hello.
I'm Shandromand. Hello.
I'm Toshiro. Hi.
And today we are going to be discussing romance in RWBY, everybody's favorite topic that starts absolutely no shit.
I think, honestly, it's probably the least controversial topic of RWBY.
I want what you're smoking, buddy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I need your sarcasm newsletter so I can tell the difference.
To begin with...
Every time I'm sarcastic, I'll just type /s in the chat.
To begin with, let's go over just generally what do we think about romance in RWBY. Any general thoughts about it?
Well, I think that it really doesn't factor in quite as much, especially early on. I mean, they have the all love is unrequited trope that's going around in the first couple of seasons. But then things get a little serious, and it's almost like they don't have much time for it. And they I guess they tried to address it in volume 4.
Yeah, things got a little spicy there for a minute. Yeah,
for just like a second.
Yeah, it's funny. Despite it not being the main point of the show, we do hear about it a lot.
Yes,
from fans.
Yes,
and
we
such.
do. The RWBY community is very aggressively into the romance aspect of the show. Very, very aggressively.
Yeah. Despite the fact that, as we said, and as, Miles and Carrie have said, that's not the main focus of the show.
Yeah, I mean, no, romance at best is generally a C-plot in the show. Arcos never really takes center stage except the episode where Pyrrha dies.
Spoiler
Bumblebee. Bumblebee, I mean, Eclipse generally gets developed in the background, and then Bumblebee generally only, really gets forefront focus in the most recent finale.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, Renora had a scene. Oscar kind of looked like he liked RWBY once. It's really not focused at all. In my opinion, Bumblebee is mostly just developed in the background, and that goes for basically everything.
And of course, White Knight just died the same night Pyrrha did, I'm sure.
No.
It's had its focus off and on. Some people still think it could end up canon.
No, get that cursed garbage out of my house.
Uh-oh.
Not on my podcast, you don't.
Here we go.
Starting a ship war already.
Just pull the Glock out. Say psych right now. We're talking about canon right now.
But let's actually talk about some of the romances that have gotten some canon attention. And if we want, I don't know, start with White Knight. How do we think that was dealt with?
Poorly.
I mean, it was a joke.
Yeah,
literally, its whole purpose was to be a gag.
I've never found the source for that statement, but there is a popular belief that Miles once said, "Oh yeah, we only put this in because it's a joke between me and Kara." I
didn't know about that. I just mean how
neither did I.
From I think it was mostly mid volume 1 to the dance arc in volume 2. It was just one long gag of John just getting humiliated.
Well, but then it ties up. It's not as if that was the entirety of it. The dance arc, for whatever you think about it, whether or not it tied into the rest of everything, it did resolve that.
Yeah. And, White Knight hasn't really, at least, I don't know, I haven't watched the show in a little bit, but I don't think it really got much of a look after that.
No, they really haven't interacted at all, aside from Weiss saving... John saving Weiss's life, obviously.
Mhm.
But nothing was really done. Like, a lot of people might have expected Weiss to thank him or some interaction, and that didn't happen in Volume 6.
Yeah, that threw me. That threw me for quite a loop.
It doesn't seem like they're doing anything with it, but it's in a weird position where, like, it could happen if the creators wanted to do it, but they don't seem to want to do it.
Well, and I think the justification for that probably is because Jean's still really hung up on Pyrrha. And so that's probably the furthest thing from his mind. That's not to say that might not change in the future. I mean, life goes on. But I think between the humor nature of how it started out, and then the seriousness and the death and destruction and everything that they have to deal with, it just is it's a non-starter. But
Okay, well, a quick interjection about one of your points there. I will say this about the John being hung up on Pyrrha thing. I don't know if they're actually gonna run with this, but it looks a lot like the whole scene with the statue and the redheaded woman that is somebody. Just is somebody. We still don't know who. It's just somebody.
We know it's
Pyrrha's
a real person.
still so
third
burned about
cousin,
that.
twice removed, stepsister or something.
Whichever.
Like, I feel like that scene was meant to kind of tie up the whole Arcos thing. So
A lot of it,
White
yes.
Knight isn't dead in the water necessarily. I feel like they're about to move on from the whole, my GF for all of 1 minute and a half is dead.
Okay, but moving on from just talking about like who's going to end up with who, what do we think that this relationship added to the series? Do we think it was a waste of time? Do we think it added something to the plot, the characters, the humor, whatever?
Well, I think that it definitely added something to the show. I mean, you've got your humor aspect, obviously. John thinks he's the ladies' man, and he's totally not. But at the same time... Beg your pardon? I don't know how to respond to that.
Obligatory.
Hey, he and Neptune,
They were vibing. I mean, they were vibing about both liking Weiss, but they were vibing.
Ren, you're like a brother to me. The shipping community. Oh, baby!
I'm sorry for distracting you, Shand. Go on.
But I mean, at the same time, you're probably. I think that people are probably right that while it is a remote possibility, it seems like they're probably done with that, and they're just not going to have time for it. I mean, I could be wrong. That happens more often than not with the show. I mean, I've given up giving predictions of any kind for what's going to happen, because time and time again, Miles and Carey prove me wrong.
That's everybody. Like, remember Crow is Dead, Volume 4, Pass It On?
Crow is dead. Every volume, pass it on.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm 100% convinced he's living to the end of the show. But what White Knight added to the show is like mostly just development for John. It's kind of a vehicle for him to get his head out of his ass about a lot of things.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it is me making those comments about humor aside. It is there for kind of, a funny gag about, a guy who's really trying too hard, but it also does add a lot more to his character when it's done. Like when it's resolved and he kind of gets over it and gets over himself by extension.
The fact that he was willing to tell Neptune, like, hey, you should ask her out, it shows how earnest he is.
Yeah.
And another thing that, if I could interject, is that it gives Weiss a little bit of pause there at the end of the dance arc, realizing that Jean is actually the one responsible for the two of them actually start talking.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever a point after that where she just out and out disrespects him.
Yeah, she gives respect to his name, like, during their tournament fight. She's like, oh, he's doing pretty well. And he's like, well, Pyrrha's way better. But still, she begins to think positively of him.
Speaking of Pyrrha, should we move on to Arcos?
Oh, baby.
One thing I wanted to say about White Knight is, like,
Oh, sure.
ultimately, for a lot of people, the dance arc was their least favorite part of volume of just John. But in a lot of ways, I think it just created him. It started the upturn of his character, where he doesn't care about himself, and he just cares about everyone, and that leads to, like, him trying to sacrifice his life for Cinder and all of that.
Yeah, I agree. Although I think even more of that comes from Arcos.
Oh, baby. The one uncontroversial ship.
I mean, I think that title goes to Renora.
Okay, the second most uncontroversial ship.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I don't know.
This
Nuts and Bolts
was-
is pretty cute.
I have a very strong opinion on this one, so if you guys don't mind, I'd like to lead off on this.
Oh, I've always been an Arcos fan, but you can go ahead.
Yeah. See, it's not just a fan thing for me. Like, this... I have seen this whole plot line play out so many times. Like, I kind of knew it when it was happening. This was not so much a relationship as it was a development vehicle for one of the characters. Because, we never really got much Pyrrha development until we got to what I like to call Walking Dead development, where the character only gets their development right before they die.
Poor Noah.
Yeah. So, yeah, poor Noah. Had a PTSD moment for a second. But no, Arcos was wholly a vehicle to develop John as a character.
I don't think just John. I think it was for everyone, really, and for the show as a whole. I mean, you could say that Penny dying started off the turn towards darkness, but Pyrrha dying was on some level what cemented it.
But that is about Pyrrha, not Arcos. Like, Arcos as a relationship is for John. Pyrrha's death is for the show as a whole. They're pretty close, but yeah.
Yeah, and Pyrrha doesn't do that much forward development throughout the show. Like, she's always portrayed as... She's like... I've said it before, she's the Obi-Wan character, basically. She is already at what most people would aim at for, like, the end goal development of a character. You see her interactions with Blake, she's nice, she's forward-thinking, she's a good combatant, she's decent at being John's kind of second in command, almost, kind of his yes man when it comes to fighting stuff. So, she is his crutch, and she's not only his crutch, she's his mentor, she's his backup. So, like, her whole relationship with him, the whole nasty unrequited thing, it was partially, there was a little bit of humor in there of, oh, notice me, senpai, all that. But it was, when the whole bond between them started, it was John as a bumbling idiot, who had his head up his own ass, and even by the end of Volume 3, he was a more confident leader. He had grown a lot in terms as a fighter and as a leader, and he's grown as a person. And now at the end of Volume 6, with what looks like to be the wrapping up of Arcos as a whole, like, focus of John's character.
Getting over Pyrrha arc from volumes 4 to 6.
Yeah, it seems like he's going to be ending this as a stronger all-around character.
You say she's a crutch for him, and she's certainly a crutch for him getting songs. I don't think he has a single song that isn't about her.
He absolutely does not, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Also, I cannot get over the fact that Pyrrha's songs are so out of place on all the volumes. The first one's a discotheque song, and the other one's a jazz number. I never got over that. Nothing's wrong with jazz, it's just so out of place. Like, you got...
Which one is the jazz one?
What is it? Okay, so Shine is the discotheque one, and what's the name of it? Dream Come True is the jazz number.
So you got them out of order there.
I
Dream
like-
Come True was first.
Rarely ever listen to Dream Come True.
I mean, I find it catchy, but only the instrumental.
Do we have
Anyway,
anything else
yeah.
to say about Arcos, or do we want to move on?
Y'all please go. I want y'all to talk. I talk too much.
I mean, Arcos as like a relationship, it's not. I don't want to trash it. It's not bad, but I think there's like looking outside of what it does for the story and for John. I think my primary criticism is that Pyrrha's attraction to John doesn't really make any sense.
Right.
In Volume 2, she says she likes John because he sees her for her, not like as the champion of Mistral or whatever she is. But when you look at their interactions, when they meet, as soon as John learns who she is, like at first he doesn't know who she is, and he just treats her as another girl he wants to flirt with. But as soon as he does learn who she is, he's fanboying over her. He thinks he isn't good enough for her, and all that. It's like exactly what she says she doesn't like. And then again, during that conversation where she says that about him, he's like, "You're pure Nikos. How could you not get a date to the dance?" And that's again putting her on that pedestal that she doesn't want to be put on. So when she says she likes Sean for who she is, because he sees her for who she is, like I don't know if that really holds up.
I mean, in their day-to-day interactions, I'm sure that he probably treats her relatively normally, like she expects.
Yeah, sure.
But
Compare his
there's-
day-to-day interactions with her to Weiss's few day-to-day interactions with her. Even up
We
to
don't-
Volume 3, like she speaks to her as one would a superior. John speaks to her almost all the time, unless he's mentioning like the sort of I don't want to say class difference because that's not what it is, but like the kind of social difference between them. Like outside of that particular interaction, he speaks to her as an equal.
Yeah,
Like-
I mean, there's some truth to what you're saying, Toshiro, but I think also, like, the things you brought up were, him thinking it was cool that she was on a cereal box, and, what was the other one? Oh, like, saying she should have the date to the dance, which you could, I don't know, that could be because she's, like, famous, or it could be because she's, like, really pretty.
There's an argument that it could be because she is Pyrrha Nikos, and Pyrrha as a person is wonderful, but I don't. When you're saying it like you're Pyrrha Nikos, like you think you're the
It does sort of come
Mistral
across that
champion.
way.
Yeah, that particular scene, like I feel like it was John kind of acknowledging the pedestal, if not putting her on it.
And to be fair, that is something that kind of hurt her. Like, you could see that she was kind of hurt by that exchange.
Yeah, because she then goes off about how like John does want to be, she does want to be there with John, or the type of guy that John is, to keep plausible deniability of liking him. But what really bothers me is the first interaction. He does seem to fanboy over her, but even then, like she's already like on him, like. Even before that interaction, she's watching him when he enters the Great Hall. Like, the first time we see Pyrrha is him saying, "Wow, I wish I could find another girl," and then she's in the back looking at him. And then
She
when
looking
they
at him, or was she just there?
she was looking at him.
Well, maybe she just thinks he's cute.
I see. That's actually my thing. I absolutely think that's what it is. Like, she has this grand sweeping reason for why she claims is why she likes him, but really she just likes blonde noodles.
Damn, I want that art booty.
Which that's my primary criticism. I don't really have an issue with Pyrrha for thinking that, but I do think it kind of cuts into this narrative that some people like to spin, that Arcos is really well done and that like John is perfect for her because he sees her for her, when really I think Pyrrha just liked him.
Okay, well, to counter that, nuclear heat take coming in right quick. Pyrrha was not a well-written character. She was done too early, I guess, is what I want to say. Like,
All right, that's a little beyond the scope of our podcast.
yeah, it is. That is a little early for this.
There's something else I would like to point out that
Sure.
due to the brief nature of the episodes, I mean, we're getting highlight reels, and not a lot of the average day-to-day stuff. So and you have to kind of wonder if maybe there's a point where maybe she overlooks things, like the whole "I only have eyes for you" type of thing. But I mean, there's no way to know that because once again, we don't see the minutia of their lives in.
Yeah, which actually does get into what is my opinion, the primary flaw of RWBY, which is just lack of time to show all this stuff. Like people besides John and Weiss treating Pyrrha like she's some untouchable saint.
Sure.
John going out of his way to treat her like she isn't. But I mean, that's how RWBY was made.
We've been on Arcos for a little while now, so let's move on.
I do have one last thing I want to say, which is that I don't think Arcos is done per se. I would have thought it was, but Foreverfall kind of like the way it's sung and what it says, like it kind of seems like John says like even after death I'll still love you, which I don't know, I kind of feel like the series could end with John dying and his happy ending is being with Pyrrha in the afterlife.
It could, or it could just sort of say, even as he moves on and meets other people, he's still going to love her in his heart of hearts.
Oh yeah, sure.
And
I
one
like
other
that.
thing to point out about the soundtrack stuff is it's been said on more than one occasion that it doesn't necessarily reflect everything that happens in the show. So it's something to be taken with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
pretty sure I've heard
Miles or Carrie or both of them say that at some point.
That's been said several times.
Jeff has said some stuff about it. He's actually had conflicting statements. Like he said he gets canon information to write the songs, but also that the songs aren't about RWBY at all. But that's like topic for another time. That's just my take after hearing Foreverfall, which may not be accurate at all because Foreverfall may not be
your
accurate.
take is valid. We appreciate your take.
Thank you.
We could start talking about some of the Blake ships, or we could move on directly to some of the love polygons that this series features.
Isn't that the
Showing
same thing?
Well, right, yeah. So do we want to talk about them individually, or do we want to start talking about the larger love squares, pentagons, the pentagram that Blake's in the middle
So how about
of?
that enabler guy? I mean, yeah, I love polygons.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about one without talking about all of them.
Yeah, I agree. So when we look at it, RWBY doesn't limit itself to mere triangles.
Weak.
Aside
2D.
Aside from Jean, Pyrrha, Weiss, and Neptune, who, we've pretty much gone through that already. We've got Blake in the middle of like a four-pointed star.
Is Blake the devil?
Maybe she is.
If you ask some people on the internet, probably.
Yeah, there's some Blake hate out there. But what do we think about that whole complicated mess of all the people trying to get in Blake's pants?
It's weird that it ended up like this. Like, Adam, that's one thing. Sun and Yang, that's another. But also throwing Ilya in there, like, really kind of made it just strange.
And they never talked. That always bothered me, that after Ilya confesses her feelings, we never see them bring it up at all.
Ilya was just a flying giant space flea from nowhere. She comes into the show, I'm in lesbiabs with you, and then leaves.
I mean, it's a little more than that, I think, but...
Well, she also had a great voice actress.
She did. She did. Wasn't that Jeremy Lay, I think?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. Like, she's a good character, I'm not dissing her, but it really was a very out-of-nowhere thing that kind of struck me as weird.
Yes and no. It shows... it relates to how important they are to each other. You know, they have this very significant bond within the White Fang. I mean, look at the fact that when Blake is saying, like, I can't just leave her behind, she's my friend who I need to help even if she doesn't want it. I mean, in theory, that applies to Adam, too. Not so much in practice, because he abused her, but in theory, that is all equally true of Adam.
The way, well, at least the way Blake phrases it is Adam is like the progenitor of these, like, this extreme stance the White Fang is taking. She can't turn him because he is like the turn into dissent. He's what's causing it. He's at the heart of it.
Right.
And then she wants... Ilya is just being drawn by him. So she thinks Ilya can get off that path, but, like, Adam is the path.
Adam is the problem. Ilya is just a symptom, basically.
Yeah.
So once again, returning to the all love is unrequited trope, they really seem to like that.
I mean, at this point, we've got 3 people who are definitely in love with Blake, another who probably is, and she hasn't fully acknowledged feelings for any of them.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that she's shown feelings for 3 out of 4 of them, Ilya being the exception. Obviously, she and Adam were in a relationship.
But not necessarily the ones that they want.
Right, yes, of course. She and Adam dated in the past, but we all know that didn't exactly, that didn't go anywhere good.
Yeah, but I would say she has shown feeling. Okay, maybe she hasn't shown feelings, but it's been made clear that she has feelings for Yang, and then she's maybe probably shown feelings for Sun as well. Just to really quickly go over it, my argument with Yang is, like, Adam makes it pretty clear he's jealous of the way she feels about Yang, and that, like, there's a romantic tint to how she feels about Yang, with his final words, like, what does she even see in you and all that.
Right, at this point, it's pretty undeniable that there's something going on between the two of them that's more than just friends. The only question is, where does Volume 7 and future volumes take it exactly? But you pointed out a little while ago that it was sort of odd that while we have 3 people hearting for Blake, all that are sort of plot relevant, and then Ilya swoops in, and it just becomes almost, silly how many people are in love with her. What, do we think that's important? What do we think that adds?
If anything, I honestly feel like the whole... Okay, Ilya was not a bad addition to the series. I feel like her character was necessary, but I feel like her having the romantic connection with Blake was unnecessary. Like, I feel like all of this is just kind of cluttering up Blake's storyline almost.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
It's weird. Like, Ilya's character exists to give someone personal for Blake to redeem, and through that redeem, like, the Faunus and the White Fang and take them away from Adam. Ilya is just like the representative of that, and she's...
Yeah, and romance wasn't needed for that.
No, so it's weird that they included it.
Well, does it serve a different purpose?
Maybe my spitball theory would be that they included it to introduce the idea of like a lesbian romance with Blake to set viewers up for Bumblebee, which in which case they failed because people just took Blake's non-response as, wow, she's definitely straight. Which, yeah.
Rejoice, fans. She's straight.
Thank you,
Definitely
Ilya,
rejoicing.
for serving the straight agenda.
That is sort of funny. Is like I said before, they never talk about it after Ilya confesses her feelings, which almost does give the impression that Blake just can't return them.
Yeah.
Okay, but moving away from Ilya now, what about Sun and Yang?
Well, Sun, I guess. Okay. I feel like this one kind of got kicked onto the back burner because of all the Volume 6 stuff.
Well, right, he didn't
But,
show
like,
up much in Volume 6.
During the Volume 4 and Volume 5 period, like, this was the hot with an HAUTE topic of controversy involving Blake, because, Sun was the straight blonde boy option. So,
Well, and moreover, he was going through some of the typical tropes of like a romantic comedy, meeting her parents and stuff.
okay. Here comes my take. I do not have a problem with Eclipse, and I think that the show handled it well, especially the kind of denouement of it. Like, the whole thing of Blake's Volume 4 and 5 arc before she got into Volume 6 was that she had trouble committing, I guess. Like, she considered Team RWBY something of friends, maybe almost family, but confronting Adam put her back in a dark place that she was in before the series even started.
And she didn't want to drag her friends into that.
No, so she left, and Sun was like the first step on her returning to her old life with a newfound, sense of strength, with a kind of strength of purpose almost. And I don't think any other character could have done that well. Because, like, Sun is the only other character outside of RWBY that really has a lot of meaningful interactions with Blake. Team Juniper barely interacts with her.
Oh, you meant RWBY
Yang
the
wasn't
team.
Yang wasn't in any mental place to do it. Weiss was carted off to Atlas.
Yeah, like, everyone else was so far away, Sun was the perfect choice for it. And
he as a character is kind of like relentless. Just didn't give up on her, which she needed.
yeah, and I think Eclipse added a lot more to the show than just straight romance option for Blake. And I think the wrap up for it where where Sun has, he still has his own responsibilities, he has his own team, and that ties into After the Fall and the books and all that. I feel like that was handled extremely well. I didn't feel like they were just canning him to get him out of the way at Bumblebee. Like, he served his purpose, and now he has his own things to do. He may come back. In fact, I don't doubt that towards the end he will, but...
Yeah, I think when they reach Vacuo, he's probably going to show his face again.
yeah,
I'm excited for his backstory, honestly.
me too. He's a good boy. I love him.
He is a good boy.
Talking about the hot topic with Eclipse is obviously that, like, as Glucose just said, it was shoved out of the way for Bumblebee, or so people claim. And my take on that is there was actually just a thread on the subreddit about it a few days ago. I think they were setting up both Eclipse and Bumblebee as possibilities in the show. Like, Volume 1 starts off with Sun winking at Blake. That's like, he's introduced as a potential love interest. And then Volume 2 introduces some stuff for Yang that can maybe do it. And then Volume 3 sets Yang and Blake on that Adam arc that leads them to where they are today. So basically, like, Monty way back in Volume 2 said he was open to LGBT relationships among the cast. And through process of elimination, that really could only be Blake and Yang. So I think that they set up both Eclipse and Bumblebee as possible relationships for Blake, and eventually went with Bumblebee. I don't know why. And so it doesn't negate Eclipse's development. Like, I don't know about any of you, but like 19-year-olds can definitely have feelings for more than one person at a time.
Can confirm, was 19 once.
I was 19 like 3 weeks ago.
Happy late birthday.
It's been a while for me.
So like it's not out of the blue that like Blake would have feelings for both of them, and eventually like Sun kind of helps her make the choice by getting out of the way, and in Neptune's words, letting her go.
Yeah. And even if people think that Sun was quote-unquote kicked under the couch for Bumblebee, like, you can't discount that, both Yang and Blake's arc with confronting Adam and Sun's bringing Blake back into the game kind of arc, they both added something to her character. It wasn't just a dalliance or anything.
Yeah, they were both necessary.
Absolutely.
Months ago, I read a post that said, there's two sides of Adam, right? There's like the extremist side and there's the abuser side. His Sun is Blake's ally in the extremist side. He's the one that's by her side when she takes down him as a leader of the White Fang in Volume 5. And then Yang is her ally for the abuser side, and she's the one who takes him down as an abuser in Volume 6.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. I like that.
Yeah, and they're like shadow archetypes of the worst parts of Adam. Sun is also a faunus.
But are you saying that it's the worst part of Adam that he's a faunus?
No. Shadow archetypes is in the opposite.
So, like, I'm getting there. So he's still a faunus. There's that connection between all three of them. But where Adam, is extreme. He advocates violence. He doesn't believe in coexisting with humans. Sun he's pro-coexistence. He's a genuinely kind person to not just Blake, but to everyone that he meets. He's more jovial. He's less vicious.
And there's an interesting dichotomy to that too, because where you have Adam's life experiences where he obviously had very negative interactions with humans, it sounds like Sun probably doesn't have that experience.
Because he did grow up in Vacuo, where there's not nearly as much racism.
Exactly.
It's just...
We're all poor and stuck in the desert together. Yang on the other side, whereas Adam was emotionally manipulative and downright abusive, Yang has tried and slipped up a few times in being to be Blake's emotional rock. She's tried to back her up, and she's never gone so far as to go out of her way to hurt her or attack her.
Yang does her best to build Blake up, and Adam continually tries to tear her down.
Yeah. Transition. How about that Bumblebee?
Not at all an inflammatory topic.
Oh, yeah.
Well, like I said before,
I've been writing a lot about Bumblebee today.
Like I said before, at this point, I don't think there's any denying that there's some kind of relationship or more than friends between Blake and Yang. The only question is where exactly they go with it.
The question is it a lesbian sisterhood or the sisterhood of lesbians?
In Barb's words at RTX, will they kiss? 2020.
Yeah, hey, they could still do it before 2020. They could do it in 2019.
I mean, I'd be willing to bet it's 2020.
Maybe that'll be our late Christmas present.
They just kiss in the first episode.
While flipping off the camera.
The fandom explodes. The end. Game over.
Ruby's
in,
done.
boys.
It was actually all about Bumblebee all along. Get dunked
The
on.
truth is,
That,
the
that's
game was
it.
rigged from
Show
the start.
over.
But yeah, I'm obviously biased. I thought Bumblebee was going to be canon since Volume 3, which wasn't a popular take back then.
I find that hard to believe.
You would be surprised.
Around that time in the fandom, I would argue that the Blake ship that had the most traction was Eclipse, just because Sun and Blake had so much more, of that kind of interaction. Yang and Blake's interactions were solely on the level of teammates.
And it was, it was mostly like that scene with Adam, and then that scene like burning the candle when they talk to each other about the dance. Whereas, Sun was winking at her and she was blushing, and there's all of that. And so when I advocated that on the sub or wherever, it wasn't a popular opinion. So I'm not.
They hated Tosh because he told them the truth.
As I said, I'm biased, but I know a lot of people who are unbiased, and pretty much every single one of them is like, yeah, it's happening at this point.
Yeah, so let's actually talk about that a little bit. What do we think about how shipping affects the, view of canon relationships and vice versa?
Honestly, as someone who deals a lot with the community, especially the shipping community, being as I write trash, the shipping community for RWBY is a lot more influential on the fans' perception of the show than for other mediums and properties. Like, it is very aggressive in how it affects people's view of things. Like, just look at Bumblebee, we mentioned.
For a lot of
earlier.
people, it's not for fun. It's like they're playing for keeps.
Yeah. Like, look at Bumblebee. Look how aggressive some people are. Just, it's ruining the show. It's horrible. It's this terrible thing. And
It's also worth
like, this is the only relationship. Sun is canceled party. All that.
It's also worth pointing out that despite all the protestations from Miles and Carrie, that the fandom doesn't have an impact on the direction of the show. I have a feeling that it kind of does anyway. But that may also be just because the fans are in sync with some of the they're kind of on the same wavelength, possibly.
Right. I mean, if Bumblebee happens, some people are going to say that it's pandering at this point.
Regardless of if it happens or not, it's either pandering or it's gay baiting.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what they do, they're gonna get heat for whatever the decision is.
Which is why you hope that they just do what they want to do. And I'm sure that is what's happening. I mean, I think at least on some level they would have a plan for that from near the beginning.
Well, not only that, but there's also the fact that, like for instance, Barb and Aaron are both big Bumblebee fans, and I'm sure that has something to do with their decision-making process as well.
I'm not sure about that specifically. Especially like pre-Volume 6, whenever Aaron and Barb talked about Bumblebee, they were always very clear that they liked it as fans. Like, their interest in it was purely like, they think these girls are cute together, doesn't mean anything for canon.
The word of St. Paul is not nearly as powerful as most people think it is.
It's not even... They aren't speaking as St. Paul. They aren't speaking as people who have inside knowledge on the show. They're speaking as people who enjoy the show. Like, that's... When they talked about liking Bumblebee, they are clear that's what that is. Like, I can link you panels of them, like, saying, yeah, I like Bumblebee specifically as a fan.
Right, they've made that very clear.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't think that even if they really were rabid about it, which I think is pretty unrealistic, but I don't think that the voice actors would really have any more influence on the direction of the show than the fans do.
Yeah, and that said though, that Monty quote I brought up where he talks about LGBT romance. I'll try and find the exact quote. He says like, he says,
If it's the one I think you're thinking of, he says something to the effect of,
we're definitely not opposed to it. A lot of us are for it. I have some cast members and crew members who are like, this would be really cool. But the thing is, we can't just shove it out there. It has to be earned, which is a better way to do it. And for a lot of these characters, we try to look outside of their gender, so we just want to do what's natural for them. So I'm sure, like, maybe Aaron was like, hey, Bumblebee would be pretty cool. I don't know if you guys have decided or not, but, like, if you guys decide to do that, I think that'd be neat for the LGBT community and also just as a story. That doesn't mean they listen to them, though.
People who work on a property do actually have more influence on it than people give them credit for. As someone who's looked into the industry, like, there are plenty of examples of... This isn't normally on shows like RWBY that are... I'm not saying RWBY's small anymore, because it's not.
right.
But, like, RT is becoming not a media juggernaut, but, they're becoming a pretty big media conglomerate in their own right. And bigger shows, like, there are plenty of examples, like, for example, in live-action television, like, I'll give you an example, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Spike wasn't a popular character. They didn't have anything written for him, but the fans loved him so much, and he wowed everyone so much that they had pre-written the whole show, but they changed everything from that episode on just to accommodate this one character that got so popular.
And we see that with Roman. He was intended to go away after the first episode, but...
Yeah, not to mention Neo.
Yeah, like Neo, we never thought she was going to come back, and then all of a sudden she's now one half of the hidden dragon big bad.
What's this we business, pal?
We talking crazy.
I haven't seen the director's commentary, but they said, like, well, we put Neo in because Cinder's story was boring and the fans love her. And that's what they did with Torchwick too.
Of course, Cinder's just boring by herself, so...
Well, I mean...
When you don't have a backstory, what are you going to do?
It is sort of crazy that the fans were able to influence things that much that,
When you think about it, I don't know how big a role Neo would play. I would guess she gets a fight and then leaves, maybe dies. But Roman really was just taking the place of some other random characters, specifically the Albanes. And it's just like essentially a reskinning of those characters into what we know as Roman. It's not especially for a show just getting off the ground, it's not a huge change. And I don't think that they would like make as huge a change as the end relationships for two main characters based off of.
Well, right. So that is what I was going to ask. We know that they have a general outline of all future volumes, just sort of a vague idea of what they're each going to do, and that they have for a while. Like, I think we can probably assume that going to the various kingdoms, maybe the relics, maybe some other plot device, and defeating Salem, we know that they have that. And that they have had that. What do we think about hypothetical Bumblebee? Do you think that's something that they would have known about the whole time, or something that was a more recent addition?
As I said earlier, I think it was an option. Like, they were thinking about it, but as Monty said, we just want to do what's natural for them, and eventually, maybe they decided Bumblebee was more natural than Eclipse, so that's what they went with.
So,
Okay.
but what do you guys think? Glucose, Shand, do you guys think that end relationships would be already decided near the beginning? Or
I actually do not
predetermined, you mean?
yeah.
Like, I don't believe that was the case for, because I've got a lot of really hot takes today, I'm sorry. Monty writing a story, like writing a long-running, deep, cohesive story, was not his strong suit.
I think we can kind of see that in some of the interactions we know about between him and Miles and Carrie.
Yeah, Miles and Carrie are the story guys. Monty is the idea guy. Like, he was the idea guy, God rest his soul. But, I don't feel like he would have had, like, the specifics nailed down to that extent. Like, I feel like this is a Miles and Carrie thing. Like, when they kind of took over the reins for good after, I would say probably around the end of Volume 2, the beginning of Volume 3, maybe right before Monty passed, that was when maybe these kind of decisions got made. This is all hypothetical. I don't know how Miles and Carrie think, but I don't think it was from the day that Monty, took a look at his ketchup stain and figured everything out that he's like, I'm gonna have me 2 cute lesbians right here.
And right specific on that ketchup stain is where they'll get married.
Right here.
See this dragon continent? Right in the dragon's ass.
Ketchup stain lesbian. The best kind of lesbian.
What about you, Shand? What's your opinion?
Well, I think that maybe, like as has been suggested already, with Miles and Carrie taking the narrative aspect of the story. I mean, they made it clear that once we'd gotten past spoiler range, like Pyrrha was slated to die right from the very beginning. So we know that they do have certain things that they have planned, but I can't source this for you, but I could swear that they have made certain changes, not big ones per se, but I know that I want to say that I know that they have altered their plans as the story has progressed.
Definitely. They talk about moving things back to future volumes, like planning to do something in 6 and moving it to 7, or moving something from 5 to 6. So definitely plans change.
Maidens is easy example, because Maidens weren't a concept until after Volume 2 aired, and they're integral to the plot now.
And that's not unique to RWBY. I mean, any story being written, there are good chances of having to move goalposts or change events entirely. I've encountered it myself in a number of the stories that I've written. So I don't want to commit to anything because just because of the nature of writing and how things can change. But I think that there might be or might have been a definite plan for certain characters. At the same time, I'm absolutely certain that there was no plan for certain other characters.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Okay, is there anything else we want to add at this point? Or are we about ready to wrap up?
I think that's, unless you want to get into Emerald and Cinder.
I actually wouldn't mind talking about Emerald and Mercury.
We went from problematic to unproblematic, so let's go with Tosh.
Well, I think we can talk about both of those a little bit.
Well, Emerald and Cinder is really just Gay, Blake, and Adam. I mean, except there actually is physical abuse. Like, I think it's been confirmed that Adam and Blake's relationship was never physically abusive while they were together. But, I mean, we hear Cinder slap Emerald, and she's clearly, like, very manipulative and dominant over her. So it's not healthy, and it could be construed as worse. Except Cinder hasn't tried to murder Emerald yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious. Emerald is staking her feelings on Cinder, and Cinder doesn't reciprocate them. I mean, Mercury even tries to point that out to her.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd go as far as say it's obvious that not only does Cinder not acknowledge or return those feelings, she actively
she actively takes advantage of them.
Yeah, that's
a fair assessment.
she controls Emerald by like playing on those feelings and making Emerald want to impress her, and she controls Mercury by being nice to him, I guess.
She learned from the master, or mistress, guess you want to put it that way.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Man, I don't think we're going to get to Salem and Ozpin, unfortunately.
Unfortunate. We didn't think about that.
Another ultimately toxic relationship. RWBY loves its abuse survivors.
Evil grim mommy.
Does Oz really count as a survivor when their relationship ended with her blowing his head off? I don't know.
I mean, he's still alive, so...
Via reincarnation, which I think, strictly speaking, means he is not. He is not a survivor.
He has experience. He has experienced abuse, and he is still here. But
He's just the living incarnation of that meme, I lived, bitch.
Meanwhile, Salem was also abused by her father, and I think we sort of see it, we can sort of see it as a cycle. Like, she was abused, and then she became the abuser in turn, just sort of repeating what her father did to her in a way.
which is actually a lot like Adam, who was abused by the STC overseers or whatever, and turned that abuse on Blake, but also all of humanity. And then, there's also Mercury, who was abused by his father brutally, and now is just generally a dick to people and kills them. There's a lot of, cycle of abuse in RWBY. And speaking of Mercury, I do think that he will break that cycle, and he'll do it because of Emerald, because Tyrion says he doesn't have he's too scared to break that cycle, because it's all he's ever known. But I think Emerald will give him that strength, because he actually cares about her, unlike anything else.
He cares enough to try and point out that Cinder's using her.
And he might care enough to try and save her, even beyond just pointing it out. That's what I think.
Yeah, that is something we might see in the future.
Definitely.
And then there's also mutual care from from Emerald, because she's kind of pissed when Tyrion tries to stab Mercury. There's some mutual feelings there, which we don't see from them in any other character. All they have is each other, really.
That's true. Even if it is limited purely to we're the only ones here who are kind of almost normal, that's still something to build a relationship on. The fact that they're surrounded by psychopaths and mass murderers and genocidal crazies.
And they're just a couple of kids deep down.
Mm-hmm.
So deep down, even after all they've gone through and all they've done, they're still just a couple of kids.
As Raven put it, a couple of kids that Cinder tricked into following her.
Yep. Mercury and M one off of Cinder's wild ride.
I think we all won off Cinder's wild ride at this point.
Okay. Well, there's more that we could talk about, whether it's the parents or other things, but at this point, do you think we've said everything important?
Does anyone else have any prospective relationships they'd like to see?
Like to see? Oh, let's not go there. We'll be here all night.
All right.
No thanks.
That they could see.
I mean, I harbor some good feelings for Rose Garden, but that could go any number of ways.
I don't think Ruby's gonna get a romance at all.
I would like
Honestly,
to see RWBY
I think that's,
be ace and confirmed ace.
Yeah, that could easily be at this point.
Yep.
All right, but at this point, this has been the Cacawphony, reporting to you from the Crow's Nest Discord server, which you can access through the RWBY subreddit. I am Ted.
I'm Shand.
I'm Glucose.
I'm Leo. Or Toshiro, I guess.
And,
Leo.
And we love you as much as these characters all love each other, and goodbye. See you next time.
Bye-bye.